Hello, good evening,
Good
everyone. Good
evening.
evening. Right, okay,
Good
dear.
evening.
So, how are you today? Good.
Fine.
Okay. Now, you know, last time we actually did this jigsaw method and um, flipped method. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So now we are looking at uh, models of teaching, right? Because our topic is educational technology, that is everything related to learning and teaching process that we are discussing. So under that we need to discuss um, models of teaching, right? So there are several models of teaching. So you might
Excuse
ask, what is, yeah,
ma'am. That day you said that you will be sending us the assignment. That
it
day
is
you said
sent.
that you will be given assignment of the flipped method, and you showed us an
Oh,
example.
yeah. Yes, I sent, no? You didn't get?
It's not upload. I just now I
I
went
will,
and checked in
yeah,
LMS, but
I will attach the campus uh, tomorrow, right?
okay, ma'am.
Right, definitely, because you need to, normally they give you how much time for an assignment? 2 weeks.
That day you said that you will be given us 1 month time. That
Yeah, I
day,
can give you 1 month. I will request. Okay, no problem. But it's if it is
okay.
only either one of them, flip method or
Jigsaw
uh,
method.
jigsaw method, actually speaking, it's a small assignment. So 1 month is too much. If both are to be done, I thought of giving 1 month. Then you said no. With some subjects, it's very difficult to consider uh, jigsaw method කියලා. Because of that, I thought of giving either this or that. Then, of course, 2 weeks or 20 days is enough, no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I will actually resend it and speak to them. They will upload it. Okay, right. Then,
Oh,
okay, na? Right. Now we are going to look at teaching models. Now, in this, we first discuss teaching approaches, then discuss teaching methods, then discuss teaching um, techniques. We did not discuss, no questioning and all that. Did we discuss teaching techniques?
grouping techniques you just did.
Yes, yeah, it's not very serious. Don't, we can actually forget about it. Now we are going to get into a kind of a big topic, teaching models. So now you can take down notes, otherwise you will not know head and tail of it, right? The big topic is teaching models. So now you might wonder what is meant by teaching model, right? What is meant by teaching model? I will tell you what is meant by teaching model by giving an analogy. Okay. Now think, you know approaches, whether this is teacher centered or student centered. Then based on that, you select methods. I'm going to use flip method, I'm going to use this method and all that. Then you select some techniques like grouping or questioning or whatever, right? And but as you are novice teachers, you still lack experience. Now, some of maybe that experienced teachers, but suppose that you are a novice teacher, you do not know how to actually uh, put all these ideas in approaches, methods, and techniques into a framework and conduct the teaching session. That is a difficulty, right? So, approaches, the elements are there. Methods, the elements are there. Techniques you are selecting, elements are there. So, how to put them into the classroom teaching and learning session? What framework to be actually used? That is a difficulty for you at the initial stages. Then, of course, the teachers use models of teaching that is actually made available to you. And these models of teaching, they tell us how to conduct your teaching session. What is the first step? What is the second step? What is the third step? And all that. So, we discussed two main approaches, that is teacher centered and student centered. So, if you are a teacher centered, if you are using the teacher centered approach, I have a model to introduce to you based on the teacher centered kind of approach, that is PPP model of teaching. PPP model of teaching. So, this PPP model of teaching, it tells you what to be done first in the class when you're doing your teaching. What is to be done second, next step, what is it? What is the next after that? What, like that, based on the teacher centered approach, its elements, and its components. And teacher centered approaches are grounded on behaviorism. So, because of that, this behaviorism, the elements of behaviorism, what they believe, what are their philosophical assumptions, they are actually taken into consideration in developing this model. So suppose now you want to be student-centered teacher, but you know what student-centered teaching approach is, what are the methods coming under it, what are the techniques that you can use if you're student-centered, but how to connect it and conduct a lesson. That is a difficulty for you. For that, you can actually use the 5E model of teaching. 5E model of teaching, which is grounded on constructivism and which is highly student-centered. It's like this. Now, you know you're sewing, right? You know you're sewing. You can use the machine. You can actually stitch. Uh, you know you're sewing. But different aspects, elements, or things related to sewing, you're well aware. But when it comes to getting your sari jackets done, I'm giving you some other example, right? Though you know how to use the machine, do you know how to actually stitch? Do you know how to actually have the buttonholes and all that? Putting all these things together and getting a sari, doing a sari jacket, you're not an expert. You're not an expert. Then what you can do is you will get who's your mom, because she's an expert in sari jackets. So you get your mom to do a block for you, right? And she does a block for you. And then you bring the block home, keep it on the cloth, cut the cloth, and then now, of course, you can stitch it because the basic block is given to you by an expert. Similarly, when you are a novice, inexperienced teacher, you lack the understanding that how to actually combine these elements and conduct the lesson. Then experts have developed models, and you're going to use, as you use the sari block, you are going to use that model and conduct your lesson. Then you are implementing the elements of the selected approach to teach the lesson. Is it understood or it's not understood what these models actually are about? Please tell me.
Yes, madam.
Right, very good. Then we will actually discuss two models. There are other models as well, but we will discuss two models of teaching. One is PPP model of teaching. The other one is the 5E model of teaching. And I know you all are from SLEAT and you all are from, some of you are from colleges of education, and you all have done this skill. I'm quite sure. Just tell me, have you done this?
Yes, madam.
Yeah. So you have an understanding about it. But we need to discuss it again. So I'm starting with the PPP model of teaching. Okay. So what does it stand for, the PPP model of teaching? What does it stand for, PPP model? What does it stand for?
Production,
Your,
preparation,
the
and
first,
process.
no, no. Are you sure? The first P for presentation. Yeah, the first P for presentation. The second P for practice. And the third P for production. Right? That is as teaching model. ఒక మేనేజ్మెంట్ కే తీయనో PPP model එක different. This is as a teaching model. Okay. So how you conduct your teaching session? What is the first step? What is the second step? What is the third step like? You are given a framework. Okay. Now, as I told you, PPP model is grounded on behaviorism. Because of that, it's highly teacher-centered. It's highly teacher-centered. So PPP model, presentation, practice, and production stage of a lesson. This model is grounded on behaviorism. So this is a teacher-centered approach. So when you use the PPP model to conduct your lesson, Your lesson is conducted in three main stages. Your lesson is conducted in three main stages. What are the three main stages of the lesson? The first P for presentation, second P for practice, and the third P for production. So we will now discuss what are the special features of each of these stage, what purpose do they serve, and how it is to be conducted. If you take the presentation stage, right, this is actually teacher is the highlight because this is grounded on behaviorism. So teacher explains everything to the student first. Teacher explains the content to the student first because this is behaviorism. Teacher is the authority, teacher knows the knowledge. Because of that, teacher explains the content to the student. So during presentation stage, students are actually passive. They listen and learn, they see and learn, right? Teacher is very active during the presentation stage. During the presentation stage, teacher talk time, TTT, is high. It's about 75 to 80% of teacher talk time during the presentation stage. But student talk time is very low in the presentation stage. Students are made to actually listen and learn. Listen and learn. Right? Students are made to listen and learn. Suppose you are going to teach the students the water cycle. Then teacher goes in front of the class, explains everything to the students about the water cycle. And students listen and learn. If you're an English teacher, you want to teach them simple present tense. You start the lesson with a presentation of the grammar rule. You tell the students this is how simple present tense is used. This is how the verb formation is all about. Students listen and learn. Right. So teacher talk time is 80% and student talk time is only 20%. Students listen and learn what the teacher explains. Highly teacher-centered. Teacher knows, teacher actually explains and tries to impart it to the learner. Okay, learners are very passive. Okay, then we go to the seconds. Normally, if it is a 40-minute lesson, the teacher can spend about 5 to 7 minutes in the presentation stage. 5 to 7 minutes in the presentation stage. After teacher explaining everything, the teacher may ask concept checking questions from the learners. Teacher may ask concept checking questions from the learner to see whether they have understood it. Maximum 5 to 7 minutes out of the 40 minutes lesson. Then the teacher can go to the second stage of the PPP model lesson. Right. What is the second phase of the PPP model lesson? Practice stage. Practice stage. Half of the class time is spent on practice stage. Half of the class time is spent on practice stage. Why half of the class time is spent on practice stage? Because repetition and learn. Repeat and form habits. Learning is habit formation through repetition because PPP model is teacher-centered and grounded on behaviorism. So get them to repeat, get them to practice, and practice gets them to form habits. So half of the class time is spent on the practice stage. What are the special features? If you talk about teacher talk time, 40%, and student talk time, 60%. Now the students practice it with the teacher. So it's like 50-50, you can say. Teacher talk time and student talk time. And half of the class time, that means out of 40, 20 minutes, is spent on the practice stage. And there, this is grounded on behaviorism now. So they don't allow mistakes. Mistakes are not tolerated. Because of that, all the activities given are controlled practice activities. Controlled practice activities. That means filling the blank, matching exercise, transformation from singular to plural, right? From positive to negative, uh, a close passage. The students do not have freedom to actually practice the subject matter freely. Instead, it is actually highly controlled. Why highly controlled? You should not make mistakes because learning is habit formation. Then you come to the last stage or the third P of the PPP model. The third P of the PPP model is the production stage. There, of course, you have about 10 to 12 minutes, and there, the teacher gives the students to use what they have already learned, that knowledge, and produce some new, do something new. For example, if you teach them the water cycle, and after giving them matching, illustrating, and activities, you can ask them to actually do a poster on the water cycle. Use what they learn and do something else. It's the production phase. If it is simple present tense, after controlled practice of simple present tense, you ask them to talk about their daily routines. So production state is actually a bit fluency oriented. Some freedom for the learner is given. They can freely use that language, not 100% though, right? Not 100% though. So they are fluency oriented. Learner teacher talk time is less, only 20%. Student talk time is increased and maximized to 80%. Okay. This is about how to actually organize, plan a PP model of teaching. Anyway, don't worry. Once the two models are done, once lesson planning component is done, we are going to write one PPP model lesson plan, one 5E model lesson plan. Okay. So these are the three stages of the PPP model. Any questions before I actually go to the next model, 5E model? Any questions? No?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Yeah. Anyway, we are going to actually look at lesson plans once we finish discussion of lesson planning. This is just introducing the PPP model to you, right? When you talk about the three stages of the three Ps, make sure that you talk about the class time allocated out of 40, teacher talk time and student talk time, whether it's accuracy oriented or fluency oriented, etc. So practice activities are highly controlled activities. Only one word to be changed, only matching like that. Okay, in the production stage, they are given some freedom to use what they learned in produce in the last activity, production activity. This is actually a behavioristic perspective of learning, teacher-centered teaching. Okay, behaviorism and teacher-centered. But we don't say no to that. No, we know behaviorism and constructivism both have their good and bad. So there are instances that we have to be teacher-centered. If it is a large class with a vast content to be covered in one session, you can't go student-centered. You have to definitely go teacher-centered. So likewise, that based on the approach that you select, if it is behaviorism and teacher-centered teaching, you can use the 5E model with the 3 stages of the lesson. For the time being, this is just introducing the 5 models of teaching plus the PPP model. So can you ask me a few questions on that before I move on to 5E model? Can you? Lamai, any questions?
No, madam.
No, madam.
Right. Now, this is just introducing the model, right? We will be looking at lesson plans of 5E model and PPP model. Then we will look at the 5E model of teaching. Okay? This is also a teaching model where you can see it is systematized. Okay. I'm sharing now. The 5E, madam, could you please share the educational psychologist to PowerPoint presentations and this? No, I don't get you, Sumaya. Can you actually talk? Yesterday's PowerPoint you're referring to. Okay. Anyway, I have been sending lecture notes time to time, but yesterday's one I have not sent. So I will do the needful by tomorrow, right? So don't worry. Then the 5E instructional model or the teaching model. So 5E model is actually grounded on, okay, Sumaya. 5E model is grounded on constructivism and it's highly student-centered teaching. 5E model is grounded on constructivism. We have actually studied we have learned what is behaviorism and what is constructivism. So if you use 5E model, you're a student-centered teacher grounded on constructivism. That is how the model is actually developed. Okay? If you are student-centered and you want to teach using the elements of constructivism, you can use the 5E model of teaching because it's grounded on constructivism and highly student-centered. So this is also framework for teaching. 5E model. There are 5 stages to the lesson that you're going to conduct. Your lesson can be arranged or planned to be conducted in 5 stages. What are the 5 stages? The 5E stands for the 5 stages. First E, engagement activity. Second E, exploration activity. Third E, explanation. Fifth E, elaboration. And the final P is to the last E is actually evaluation. Evaluation is all throughout the lesson. All throughout the lesson. So because of that, no problem. But if you take the engagement activity, it is limited to 3 to 4 minutes of the 40 minutes. If you take the second stage, explanation, you can actually take adequate time. Then explanation that the students explain. So I want to actually now discuss what are these 5 stages and what are their specific features during first stage, what happens during second stage, what happens and all that. Okay. So we'll take one by one. What happens in the engagement stage, what happens in the exploration stage, what happens in the explanation, and then after that elaboration, and then finally evaluation. We'll be discussing the features of each of these stages of the 5E model. Okay. Give me a second. Right now. Now the engagement stage, right? Grounded on constructivism, it's highly student-centered. So then you should know what are the actually considerations there. So in the engagement activity, the purpose is to get the learner to recall prior knowledge. Get the learner to recall prior knowledge, which is actually helpful for them to understand new knowledge. Why? Because 5E model is grounded on constructivism. Then the learner, actually, the 5E model, the learner has to discover new knowledge. The teacher doesn't explain, instead, the teacher gets the learner to discover new knowledge. So it's discovery learning, trial and error learning. So if the learner has to discover new knowledge during engagement stage, right? The teacher gives them an activity to recall their prior knowledge. Because in constructivism, the learner is not an empty vessel. Learner has their prior knowledge and capabilities. So the teacher has to actually connect what the learner already knows with the new information in the constructivism. Okay? So it is something easier than that. You need to actually develop the art of actually developing lesson plans and developing materials. Okay. Now the engagement activity is the first activity. You're going to actually spend about 5 to 7 minutes of the 40 minutes only. And this is, of course, you're not going to introduce the lesson itself there. Instead, you give them a small activity to recall what they already know, which is helpful in discovering new knowledge that you're going to present. That is it. So as the teacher, you should know this is my lesson today. And if I recall students' prior knowledge about this, and it helps them to actually understand the lesson objectives or understand the content to be explored easily. So you're going to actually give them a small activity to recall their prior knowledge. For example, if you're an English teacher, now today you're going to teach them present continuous tense. So if you're using the 5E model, the first stage is the engagement stage. And during the engagement stage, the students have to actually recall their prior knowledge, existing knowledge, because they are not empty vessels according to constructivism. So students already know how to form the ing verb, the rules of ing verb. So you recall it by actually giving them a small classroom activity, whole class. Always engagement activity is a whole class activity. Can you have an educated guess why it's always a whole class activity? Can you just guess it? Engagement activity, the first stage, the activity that you give is a kind of a whole class activity. What can be the reason? Just give it a try. Hey, happy whole class activity එකක් දෙන්නේ.
It is related to easy to management.
No, that is not the reason. The reason is something that they already know. Because of that, to promote volunteerism. Volunteerism කියලා කියන්නේ කැමැත්තෙන් ඉදිරිපත් වීම. So at the outset itself that you are going to actually get them to be willing to learn the lesson, right? So they can be willingly do that. Why? It is something that they already know. It's prior knowledge, existing knowledge. So you make it actually speaking, what you said is yes, it's very otherwise it's a mess at the beginning of the lesson itself. No, then it is systematic and easy to control. But the main purpose is that promoting volunteerism, because if they like that, they can engage in the activity and do it. For example, rules of ing, forming ing. So you give them some verbs and then you put the columns on the board, and then as in cutting, double the final letter and put ing. As in if it is ending with e, cut e and add ing. Like that you have columns. Then they read the verb, pick the verb and read it and say write. So it goes into cut e and add ing. And this is put. So double the final letter. They go and actually put it in the correct column. This is something they already know. They will willingly take part in that as a whole class activity. If there are students those who have forgotten this, it can be recalled and revised through the activity, right? Then they recall there, that then they remember. Okay, and it's only 5 minutes out of 40 minutes class. Now they know, right? What I already know is going to be helpful in doing the today's lesson. So they are motivated. They are motivated because they know something, a little bit of thing I know. So because of that, I will be actually actively take part in the lesson. So always, all the stages, you give them activities because it's highly student-centered. It's highly constructivism. So you get them to do activities and discover new knowledge. So because of that, it's activity-based. Engagement activity is to recall prior knowledge. You're not going to teach. They have some knowledge. That knowledge, prior knowledge, they have lots of prior knowledge. But this is what is relevant, related to the discovery of today's knowledge. So that is recalled by the teacher through an activity given to the whole class. And volunteers will take part. Okay. And then they will actually remember what they actually know if they have forgotten it. So then the teacher can move on to the second stage of the 5E model. If you take the second stage of the 5E model, okay, it is the exploration stage. It is the exploration stage. Second stage of the 5E model is the exploration stage. What is this exploration stage? The teacher gives them an activity and the students actually explore the new knowledge through the carrying out of the activity, right? And they actually exploit and discover new knowledge. So there the teacher has to be very smart. Why? The teacher has to find material. Based on the material, teacher has to give them a task. So they actually read something and uh, engage in another activity by reading it. They watch a video and then they come to know the subject matter, and by looking at it, they do some activity like that. And then it's a challenge for the students. Because of that, the teacher has to facilitate the discovery in the exploration stage. How can the teacher facilitate the exploration in the um, exploration stage? As I told you in discussing constructivism, okay? Teacher has to get them to put in groups and pairs, cooperative learning. Teacher puts them into groups of pairs. Then there is more than one head. It's always better. So they can share and they can get together and they can discover the new knowledge by exploring the material given to them with a task. That task is termed as noticing task. The task is known as noticing task. Okay. So you have to give them the material and the noticing task. They work and then they discover the new knowledge. For example, if it is about the life cycle of the butterfly, now the teacher plays a video about the life cycle of the butterfly. And the students in the exploration stage in the uh, work with their groups. And then teacher gives them a noticing task. That is, while watching the life cycle of the butterfly, there is an illustration of the life cycle. And they watch the video and complete the illustration with the words and all that. And then there is specific words and its definition about the life cycle of the butterfly. Pupa මොකක්ද කියලා තියෙන නේද ඒක මොකක්ද අන්න ඒ වගේ. So they watch the video and they know the words, they know the extent definitions and match it. So material and the noticing task or the activity. You put them into groups, then they can actually work together and discover the new knowledge rather than teacher telling these are the stages of the life cycle of the butterfly. You get them to watch the material, the video. You give them a noticing task while watching the video that they do gain information and do the task, and they come to know the life cycle of the butterfly. Okay, so that is the exploration stage. You can spend half of your class time on the exploration stage because it needs time. The students needs to discover new knowledge and followed. But the third stage of the 5E model is the explanation stage. Explain. There, of course, teacher gets the learners to present what they have discovered, the knowledge that they have discovered, answers to the noticing activity. They are going to actually explain it to the class. So teacher gives them feedback after getting them to explain, right? So then the fourth stage is the elaboration stage. So they have learned new knowledge, it's discovered, and in the explanation, they present it to the class and teacher gives them feedback. And then now they know the knowledge, subject matter. Now they are going to apply the subject matter and do something beyond that. Okay, do something beyond that. For example, life cycle of the butterfly, watching the video during the exploration, they actually did the noticing task. Now they know the life cycle and the words and the vocabularies. And then in the elaboration, you get them to draw a poster on the life cycle of the butterfly. If not, you get them to actually do a presentation on the life cycle of the butterfly and all that. That is actually elaboration stage. What they learned is applied into new settings. And then comes the evaluation stage. Evaluation, this is highly constructive, student-centered. So evaluation or assessment is not for grading purpose, but to actually know whether the students are learning. So evaluation happens all throughout the lesson while getting them to do tasks, and you're monitoring them, you're observing, and you're getting them to present it in the explanation stage and all that. So how the students work, they are observed, and then accordingly they are assessed. That is all throughout the lesson, not only at the end of the lesson. These are the 5 stages of the 5E model of planning a lesson. Any questions?
No, madam.
Right, okay. Now, simply that we discuss what is 5E model, what is PPP model here. But this is not adequate. So now we get on to the new topic, lesson planning. Once we discuss how lessons are planned, what are the components of a lesson plan, right? So then formulation of lesson objectives, because it's the main component of the lesson plan. Once they are done, we will finally look at one lesson using the PPP model, another lesson using the 5E model, right? So we are now going to start talking about what, as I told you, now we have done the PPP model and the 5E model, the theoretical aspect of it, okay? So what did I tell you? What am I going to discuss next?
Madam,
Yeah.
you are not audible enough, madam.
Oh, is that so? All throughout it was like that. All throughout it was like that.
Madam, I couldn't hear.
Now, okay, is it okay now? Is it okay now?
Now, okay, madam.
Right, okay, dear. Right. Now we finish our theoretical explanation of the PPP model and the 5E model. So next we are going to look at lesson planning. That is the topic. Okay,
Okay, madam.
Okay, madam.
right. So then we are going to connect it towards the end of the day. Again, once lesson planning is discussed, we need to discuss the main component of lesson planning is formulation of lesson objectives. So we are going to discuss lesson objective formulation by looking at the Bloom's taxonomy and all that. All these are done. We will actually write, uh, I will show you one PPP model lesson and one 5E model lesson. Then it will be very clear to you. Okay? Right. Then, I'm going to share my new PowerPoint that is about lesson planning. Okay? Okay. Give me a second here. Okay. Now we are looking at lesson planning. Okay. Now we are looking at lesson planning. Okay, what do you know about lesson planning? What is your idea about lesson planning? Now, y'all are teachers, most of you all. Is lesson planning important? Anything that you would like to talk about lesson planning? Can you tell me? Anything that you would like about lesson?
Detailed description of the lesson that we are going to conduct in the classroom.
Yeah, detailed description of the lesson that you are going to conduct in the classroom. I agree with that. Then, what else?
Uh, Also, it concludes that in the introduction, development, and conclusion.
Right, okay. I agree. Then what else about lesson planning?
The resources that we use and the guidelines of the lesson.
Okay, all the information is put and it's the guideline of the lesson. Okay, actually speaking, you all said it's correct. Look at the third definition. A lesson plan is a detailed guide for teaching a lesson. It's a step-by-step guide that outlines the teacher's objectives for what the students will accomplish that day. In another definition, a lesson plan is designed which shows how the elements of the lessons are systematically organized, sequenced, and presented over a period of time. Lesson plan should be detailed enough to guide your teaching. As a teacher, you must have a lesson plan for every lesson. A lesson plan is the detailed description of the course of instruction for one class. A daily lesson plan is developed by a teacher to guide class instruction. Details will vary depending on the preference of the teacher, what you're going to incorporate in the lesson plan. It actually depends on the school, depends on your personal liking and all that. But whatever the structure of the lesson plan that you're using, it doesn't matter. But there are components of lesson plan which we should not miss to make it a lesson plan. Okay, there are several components that you should not miss in a lesson plan. The format may slightly vary from one school to another school, right? But the components that you have to put into the lesson plan in writing lesson plan, it actually is common to everyone. So we are going to look at what are these common components of a lesson plan. Okay. Before that, let's look at this. Why we should write a lesson plan? What's the importance? Okay. I have put several uses of writing a lesson plan, importance of writing a lesson plan. So can you actually talk about why we should actually write a lesson plan? Why should we plan lessons before going to class? Can you tell me? Can you tell me?
Manage our time, ma'am.
Definitely, yes. It helps you to manage time because when you walk into the classroom, you have already done a lesson plan. You know what to do first, what to do next, what to do afterwards. And as it is planned beforehand, you know that you have to finish it in 40 minutes and how much time can be spent on each stage. So lesson plans
It makes the
actually
teaching
makes
learning
you to
process easy and convenient for the students and the teachers.
how come? කොහොමද ඒක වෙන්නේ? You're correct. How does it happen?
It makes easy because as we already know, this is the gonna have we are gonna taught the lesson. So it consume the time when we also can be prepared.
Right, okay. You're correct there. You know, then when you walk into the class, you have everything planned. You have the materials, you have the noticing activities, you know how to assess the students because everything is pre-planned, thought about beforehand while actually writing the lesson plan. So when you walk into the classroom, you are a very confident teacher. You know what to do first, what to do next, how to conduct the activities and everything because it's thought about beforehand. So when you walk into the classroom, it's very much easier because everything is made ready for the lesson. Visuals, if you are to use, um, noticing activities, assessing activities, writing activities, everything is right. Okay, there was a connection issue once again. Let me share the document. Uh, right. So then as it's given here, you can see it's one step backward and two steps forward approach. Importance of lesson plan. Why do we say it's one step backward, two steps forward approach? Because backward means it's very difficult for you to write lesson plans. If you are doing 5 classes, you need to write 5 lesson plans daily, right? If you are given 8 classes, all the 8 periods, you need to write 8 lesson plans daily. It's something very tiring and you have to actually spend a lot of time and it's challenging. It's one step backward, the difficulty you face, but it's 2 steps forward. Why do we say 2 steps forward? Because you actually develop professionally and the lesson plans can be used over and over in the next year, the following year, etc. So you are going to be better equipped with knowledge, skills, and attitudes, and the materials and the lesson plans in the future. So, though difficult, it's tiring and not easy. It is seen as one step backward, but it's actually 2 steps forward approach because you're benefited, you develop as a professional, and you have a collection of lesson plans. So, next following years, in the years to come, also that you can use them, etc. Okay. It allows you to manage your time, effort, and resources efficiently, definitely, because beforehand you have thought about what's happening one after the other in the class. Because when planning lessons, you do things like that. It gives you a bird's eye view of things to be taught and learned every day. Bird's eye view, the big picture, right? Bird looks at the ground from the above. No, likewise, you can see what's happening, what's going to happen in the class from the above, like a very clear picture. It's the bird eye view. Now, it provides the teacher to actually think about, not to make the lesson monotonous, make it very interesting, and how to actually plan it to make it interesting, and all that different types of methods and strategies for different lessons. All these can be pre-planned and give thought, and then come to the class to conduct this constructivist approach or the 5E model. Yeah. Then steps of preparing a lesson plan. Steps of preparing a lesson plan. What are the steps of preparing a lesson plan? First thing is you have to decide on the learning objectives. First thing is, if you are to write a lesson plan, the first thing is you need to actually decide on the specific learning outcomes of the particular lesson. Specific objectives of the particular lesson. It's not easy. It is scientific, the formulation of specific objectives. So we are going to discuss it further by looking at Bloom's taxonomy, right? That is formulation of lesson objectives. So when you are formulating lesson objectives, you can ask this question. What is the topic of the lesson? What do I want the students to learn? What are the most important concepts, and ideas I want students to grasp and apply? And why are they important? So you will decide on this. You will kind of so outline learning objectives. So once we look at the components of lesson plan, we are getting into writing lesson objectives as well. Develop the introduction.
Madam,
Now
couldn't
that we
hear
have
me.
learning objectives in order of the importance, define the specific activities you will use to facilitate learning, right? And then plan the specific learning activity for the realization of the specific objectives to actually be in class material. Something to read, something to watch, and based on what they read, what they hear, what they watch, they can actually put it plan to teach students understanding assessment. Now this is grounded on constructivism. In constructivism, assessments are not always for grading purpose. Instead, you actually assess the child to know how much that he has or he has learned. So because of that, it's an element of
Madam, here,
consideration
madam.
that the students are given
Madam, can
freedom
you speak
to
louder?
learn, freedom they actually can develop their constructive lesson plans in a very creative manner. Okay.
Madam, we
And
didn't hear
that
anything.
timeline also very important, right? Just because when the baby or whatever, that you don't have to change that, right? Develop a realistic timeline. That in 40 minutes, you should be able to complete the lesson. You should be able to complete the lesson in 30 or 40 minutes allocated. So if you actually take a content which cannot be covered in the 40 minutes that you have, so everything is going to be a fluxless. So because of that in mind, you need to
Excuse
think
me,
of a
madam.
time frame. Lakshmi said something. Lakshmi said something.
Yes, madam, we didn't hear anything.
You can't hear me. Now?
Now okay, ma'am, but the things what you said earlier, I didn't hear anything.
I see. Okay, let's look at this now. Developing a lesson plan, the components of a lesson plan. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Now okay,
Yeah,
madam.
okay. Now, okay. Developing a
Now,
lesson plan. Developing a lesson plan. So, what are the components that you have to actually include into the lesson plan when you are writing a lesson plan? You all said title of the lesson, grade of the class, time required to complete the lesson, it's 40 minutes or 80 minutes. Learning outcomes, it's very important. As I highlight, you have to actually write the learning outcomes, specific objectives otherwise. We will look at how to write specific objectives today, right? And then learning teaching materials or the quality input. Learning teaching materials or the quality input. What materials that you need, what kind of activities that you have to bring to the class. So they have to be actually jotted down in the lesson plan. Okay. Then the stages of the lesson, the stages of the lesson, and then how we are going to assess them, assessment criteria. That is what the lesson plan should have. So I will not show this, but you know, in the lesson plan, you have to write the title of the lesson, the topic of the lesson, the unit, okay, the class or the grade that you're conducting the lesson, and then how much time is needed, whether it's 40 minutes enough or whether you need double periods, 80 minutes. And then you have to write the learning objectives, specific learning outcomes. We are going to discuss it next. And then the stages of the lesson, you have to actually know it. And then how you are going to assess your students' performance. And 5E model is, if you are using, it's all throughout your assessing, okay? Anyway, how you are going to assess the students is important. And then the reflection. Why you developed a lesson plan like this, and after conducting it, you reflect on what went all good, but went all wrong, or like that. Reflection is also a must in the today's context in lesson planning, right? Now it is 8:41. Shall we take a 5-minute break? Don't leave the meeting. Mute your mic, and we take 5-minute break, 8:41 to 8:46. So we are good. Start. We are continuing from the same lesson from 8:46. Are you okay?
Okay,
Right.
madam.
Okay. 5 minutes only. Can you hear me? Here?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, it's raining and thundering here a little bit. I was disconnected for a while, no? Sorry for the inconvenience. Hello?
Okay, madam.
Right. Then these components. So you have to have the title, the grade, class, time required to complete the lesson. Then you have to write the learning outcomes, specific objectives. That is actually a laborious task. You need to actually formulate smart objectives. So next rest of the lesson, we are going to look at how to formulate smart objectives to write lesson plans. Okay. Then we have to then write what quality inputs, what learning teaching materials are required, what quality inputs, what learning teaching materials are needed, and then the steps of the lesson. If it is the PPP model, the first P, the presentation, the second P, the practice, the third P, the production. If it is 5E model, the first E, engagement, then the second E, exploration, third E, explanation, fourth E, elaboration, and then the fifth E is all throughout, no evaluation, so no stage there. And after that, you have to write how you are going to assess them, and then that is what evaluation component. And now, of course, in the lesson plan, the last component is you have to write a reflection. Reflection is when you write the lesson plan, you have to write a reflection why you develop this lesson plan like this. My students, this subject matter is difficult. Because of that, I'm going teacher centered. I'm going to first explain. And my class is a large class today, so I'm using teacher centered methods. Likewise, why you develop your lesson plan like that, it's the first reflection. Then again, you have to actually complete your reflection after conducting the lesson. Once you conduct the lesson, you have to write whether the lesson was good, whether it has good and bad all, and if you're going to do it next time, what are the changes that you're going to, improvements that you're going to make, like that. Okay, so these are the components of lesson plan. So now, before we look at lesson plans, now we know what are the components of lesson plan, and we know the two models. We can use either PPP or the 5E model in writing lesson plans. Now we are looking at how to formulate specific objectives for the particular lesson. Okay, is it clear? Time to time you said that you did not hear me. Is it clear, Puta? Hello? Hello, am I not connected?
Okay, madam.
Right, dear. Thank you for responding. Right. දී බබාගේ ෆෝන් එක මම ළඟ. මම මේ කනෙක්ෂන් එක පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ පස්සේ ගන්නම්. හරි 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 හරි. හරි හරි. Okay, now writing lesson objectives. That is what we are going to look at now. Okay, writing lesson objectives. Identifying and writing specific objectives of a lesson. I know that some of you all are actually okay with that, but we have to actually discuss it. Can you hear me?
Yes, madam.
All right. It's heavy rains here. Right. Writing lesson objectives. When you want to write lesson objectives, you need to actually make the lesson objectives smart. This is not what I want to actually use. Let me open the proper one. educational goals, Bloom's taxonomy. This is it. So always when we write lesson plans, they are actually grounded on the Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains. Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains. Have you learned about Benjamin Bloom's learning taxonomy? Benjamin
Yes,
Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains? Yes. So always when we look at a lesson, when we want to formulate lesson objectives, we ground it on the Bloom's taxonomy. So if you take Bloom's taxonomy of learning outcomes, we can identify three main domains. We can identify three main domains or areas. The three main areas that we write lesson objectives are cognitive domain, affective domain, and psychomotor domain. If you take cognitive domain, it is actually knowledge related. We say head, 3H, head. Cognitive domain, knowledge related. We call it head out of the 3H. So then the second domain is affective domain. Affective domain is attitudes related. And it involves the growth of feelings and emotions, attitudes. That is the heart area. Okay. The second H is heart. And then we have the psychomotor domain that relates to the manual and physical skills. Psychomotor domain, the skills. And it is the hand, the out of the 3H. So these are the 3 H's of writing learning outcomes: head, heart, and hand. Head is knowledge, cognitive domain. Heart is affective, attitudes, affective domain. Hand is skills, that is the psychomotor domain. So Benjamin Bloom actually suggests that when you develop specific objectives for a lesson, you need to actually consider the development of all the three areas: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. Okay. So if you take cognitive domain, cognitive is knowledge related. We can identify 6 levels. New domain එක බලන්න. Original was nouns, then it is verbs. So the new domain. The bottom is remembering. Then the second level is understanding. Third level is applying. Then analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Okay. They are the levels of cognitive domain. So if you are teaching the primary classes, still you can think of developing all the 6 levels in the student. Still you can, right? Even in the early childhood center, you can do. For example, you teach them a kind of how to do something. So they remember it. And then they understand how to do it. And then they apply it and do it. And then they create their own building blocks. They use building blocks and they create their own, they make their own building. First, actually, they actually look at the teacher and understand how to do it and they do the same thing. But ultimately, they can be very creative. But most of the time with the young ones, we take the bottom 3, remembering, understanding, and applying. We call them LOT, L-O-T, lower order thinking. We discuss it in the flip method also. Remembering, understanding, and applying, they are lower order thinking. If it is a poem, if it is a nursery child, they will by heart, remembering. Okay, they will by heart. Then later on, they will know the meaning. Rain, rain, go away. They perform the action, go away. come again on another day. They now know the meaning also. And then applying, they will actually uh, uh, read the poem to understand, not only to understand what it is about, but to apply what is said there to the real life. That is at the higher level. Okay, now they think this poem is about an old man, a poor man. In our society also, we see old and poor people. They are neglected by their own children, like that. That is applied. Analyzing, evaluating, and creating, they are higher order thinking, hot activities. So there, of course, they use they actually analyze the poetic devices used in it. They evaluate whether this poem is appropriate to bring about the message it carries, and then they themselves write a poem based on the understanding that they gain through the poem. They are higher order thinking activities, but these are the 6 levels of the cognitive domain. So when you write lesson objectives, you need to decide which level or levels you are going to cater to in the cognitive domain, knowledge related domain. So for that, we have to actually look at a lesson and formulate. We'll do. Now here, for the explanation. Knowledge, remembering, recall data or information, recite a policy, quote prices from memory to a customer, right? Then comprehension, that is, they understand what it is about. And then application, they actually use what they have learned and do something using it. Analysis, they analyze by looking at little details, by breaking it into small parts. Synthesis, they put two and two together and try to understand the whole picture. And then evaluation or creating, they can actually go into their own creations. If you take the affective domain, that is attitude related, emotions, feelings, and attitudes. So according to Bloom's, the attitudes development, whatever the subject that you teach, it doesn't matter. You need to get them to develop their attitudes, motivations, and feelings and enthusiasm. Suppose now it's a reading lesson in English language. In that reading lesson, that you want to get them to scan it and skim it. They are the sub skills of reading. But they have a material to read. It's about environment. So it's not only to get them to develop their skimming and scanning skills, but they can develop their attitudes towards environment. We should preserve it. We should not pollute it. Like that, they should develop their good attitudes as well. So each and every teacher, irrespective of the subject, you need to get them to develop their attitudes as well. It also has levels, 5 levels. It also has levels, 5 levels. How many levels, dear? I go on talking so that I'm asking. How many levels? In the
5
affective
levels.
domain,
5
5
levels.
levels. Yeah, these are the 5 levels. Receiving phenomena, responding to phenomena, valuing, organization, and internalizing. Right? Receiving phenomena, responding to phenomena, valuing, organization, and internalizing. I will give you one of my own examples there, right? Now, as an adult, about 10 years ago, like, we were informed, when you're disposing garbage, you have to separate your garbage into 3 bins, right? Food waste in one, cardboard and plastic and paper in another, polythene nada කියලා. Right? Then I was not ready. I was actually nagging. අයියෝ තියෙන වැඩ මදිවට මේව separate කර ඉන්න බෑ. But they were not taking my garbage if I was not to separate them. So because of that, even if I'm actually not ready, I had to do that. So I received the phenomena, the awareness, right? Awareness is that I need to selected attention. I need to actually separate garbage. So then responding to phenomena as otherwise that my garbage will not be taken. So I started separating garbage. Then when I started separating garbage, after a while or after doing it for some time, then I started valuing it. කොච්චර හොඳද? This is very easy, right? For them also disposing, recycling, everything is very easier now. So this should be actually something, this is something really good. So though I was not willing initially, now I have started valuing this. Okay, I see the value of it. So as I see the value of it, now I get into organization. So now I don't use much polythene and plastic because I see a lot of polythene we are overusing. And now I use cloth bags and reed bags to do marketing, right? And I have become more organized with the attitude I developed and then internalizing. That is, values are internalized. As a value system, we should not pollute environment by the overuse of polythene and plastic, right? That is how it happens. They are the 5 levels of developing one's attitudes. Receiving phenomena, responding to phenomena, started valuing it, then become organized, and then the value is internalized. Okay. Then the third domain, the psychomotor domain. Psychomotor domain includes physical movement, coordination of the body, eye-hand coordination, use of the motor skill areas, and use of equipment to perform a task. So that is psychomotor. And you know, that also has levels. Perception, set, guided response, mechanism, complex overt response, adaptation, and organization, 7 levels. Perception is the ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activities. That we actually perceive how to do something, because this is psychomotor. No? So you need to actually perform. So first is you perceive how to do something, and then you're ready to act. You're ready to perform the act. If it is a dancing class, a Varnama. So you first perceive how your teacher dances the Varnama. And then now you're ready to actually perform the Varnama. Then you're dancing now, you're set. Then guided response. In the early stages, actually you want to actually do it, it will be trial and error. While observing the teacher only, that you will be performing, right? Mechanism. Then of course later on that you know what this Varnama is about, and you can actually, you know the why the steps are taken like that, why it is hands are formed like that and all that, right? And then complex overt response, now you can skillfully perform it. And then adaptation, now well developed, now you can actually easily perform the task. And origination, now you will not actually do the exact dance your teacher taught you. Instead, you will actually be very creative in that performance of that Varnama. That is origination, right? So that happens also in different levels. Yeah. Those are the actually 3 domains of the Bloom's taxonomy. we have to have an understanding, but most important is cognitive domain, because we write 2 or 3 uh, objectives for the cognitive domain. Then we have to actually write at least 1 objective for the affective domain and 1 objective for the psychomotor domain. That is how that learning objectives are formulated, grounded on the Bloom's taxonomy. So we looked at the 3 domains of the Bloom's taxonomy. When it comes to the levels, you have to remember only the cognitive domain, right? Other domains levels are not that important for you. Then writing lesson objectives. Always you have to make the lesson objectives smart. Always you have to make the lesson objectives smart. What does it mean by smart? Can you tell me? What does it mean by smart lesson objectives? It's an acronym. SMART is an acronym. S for what, M for what, A for what, like that. Can you tell me how to write SMART objectives, or what does it mean by SMART objectives? At least one of you? One of you? Can you? Are you there? Am I connected here?
Yes.
Yeah, Sumaya. Always you are responding. Nice of you. What does this SMART stand for? SMART is an acronym. When you're formulating lesson objectives, you have to make it smart. What does it mean by SMART objectives?
Specific,
Very good. S for specific.
measurable,
Yeah, M for measurable. Then
attainable,
A for achievable.
yeah, achievable or action oriented. Achievable or action oriented. Then R
relevant,
for relevant
relevant,
and realistic.
And
Relevant and realistic. And then T for
Time.
time bound. You're correct. So always you have to make sure that your lesson objectives are smart. Always you have to make sure that you write smart lesson objectives. First thing is grounded on Bloom's taxonomy, the 3 domains. Second thing is that you have to make your lesson objectives smart. Okay? So SMART stands for specific, measurable, action bound, relevant and realistic, and time bound. Okay? So we need to develop lesson objectives which are very smart. So how to do that? I'm going to actually get you to look at some examples. Okay? I'm opening the document. It's thundering here. What about you all? No rain or rains?
it's raining, madam.
Yeah. Thundering also, eh?
Yes,
Smart
madam.
objectives, yeah. Is it safe for you?
Yeah, madam.
No problem then. Right. Smart objectives I'm going to show you. Right. Now you can see the images of these, you know. Cognitive, affective and psychomotor domains. This is affective domain, this is psychomotor domain. writing smart learning objectives, right? Writing smart learning objectives. It's for specific. It's for specific. When setting a goal, be specific about what you want to accomplish. Think about this as a mission statement for your goal. මේවා මෙච්චර ලොකු දේවල් වැඩක් නෑ. මම නිකන් සරලව කියලා දෙන්න. Specific means you have to now suppose if you tell the students will be able to speak in English. Is it specific? Is it specific? No, it is very broad. And ultimately, you will not know whether this will be, the students will be able to do it at the end of the lesson. Because students will be able to speak English. What English? So what are they going to speak? Nothing is specifically stated. Instead, you can tell at the end of the lesson, students will be able to, right, ask questions using how many and how much. How many and how much. Then, of course, it's very specific. You know, at the end of the lesson, the students will be able to use how many and how much in questions. That, of course, we can get them to learn in the 40 minutes. But if you say students will be able to speak English, what English you don't know, then it is not specific. Is it clear? Can I give you another example? Now, it's
Okay.
a kind of a environmental studies lesson. So there, the lesson is about the life cycle of the butterfly. So if you tell students will be able to explain the life cycle of the butterfly, it is actually not very specific. Then you do not know how they are going to explain it. But if you specify that, students will be able to define the terms in the life cycle of the butterfly. Students will be able to name the different stages of the life cycle of the butterfly. It is going to be very specific. Otherwise, whatever they are telling, explaining the life cycle of the butterfly has to be accepted. But when you specify, students will be able to define the terms in the cycle of the life cycle of the butterfly. The students will be able to name the different stages of the life cycle of the butterfly. Then, of course, you can actually see whether they can do it. Otherwise, it's very difficult, broad, and you will never be able to see whether the students will be able to do it at the end of the lesson. Because lesson objectives means what the students will be able to do at the end of the lesson. Okay? So measurable. To make it measurable, that you have to see that the students are performing it. Whether the students have learned it or not, you have to measure. If you want to measure whether the students have learned it or not, you need to get them to perform an action. So make it measurable, right? You have to assess whether they have learned it or not. For that you have to actually see that the students perform an action. Otherwise, you will not be able to measure. Now, that is the third letter, A, action oriented, right? Students will be able to label the parts of the body. Students will be able to define environment. Students will be able to compare PPP model and the 5E model. then you can get the learner to perform that action. And then you can assess or measure whether they have learned it or not. Right. Then A is also discussed. Then realistic and relevant. R for realistic and relevant. So the specific objectives that you formulate, they should be achievable they should be achievable, they should be realistic. If you say that the students will be able to give reasons for deforestation, how many reasons you don't know. If you say 5 reasons for deforestation, it is realistic. It is age appropriate as well. So you have to make the specific objectives age appropriate and relevant to the lesson that you are going to do on that particular day. And then the T is time bound. Time bound means you should be able to actually achieve these objectives in the 40 minutes or the 80 minutes that you actually have. So time frame is also very important. What you can do in that time frame only that you have to consider for the lesson, right? So that is it. So I have actually some example soft learning objectives. I will be discussing them next day. Here you can see samples. Following the session, when will they be able to do it? At the end of the lesson, following the session. So when they will be able to do it is time bound. It's actually there at the end of the lesson, following the lesson, by the end of the lesson. Then participants will be able to describe an action oriented, describe 6 factors. 6 factors are specific, reasonable, and measurable that contribute to the increase of global warming. Very specific, right? Describe 6 factors that contribute to the increase of global warming. If you say at the end of the lesson, students will be able to describe global warming, talk about global warming, it's very broad. Then you do not know how to measure it. They will go on talking whether relevant or irrelevant. But here describe action oriented 6 factors, very specific and measurable and reasonable, that contribute to the increase of global warming. Come to the next part. At the end of the lesson, time bound. When will they be able to do this? At the end of the lesson. Students will be able to form. Form is the action. Formulate. Simple present passive verbs. Specify කරලා තියෙනවා. මොන verb එකද? Simple present එකේ passive verb එක. It's measurable action එකක් තියෙනවා. And reasonable because it can be actually conducted within the time frame. Then look at the next one. By the end of the lesson, time bound. When will they be able to do it? Students will be able to determine, action oriented, the relationship between milliliters and cubic centimeters, liters and cubic centimeters, liters and all that. Very specific, measurable and reasonable. You have said what they will be able to actually determine. Solve problems involving units which are used to measure liquid volumes. Not any problem, but problems used to measure liquid volumes. So it is specified as well. Right. By the end of the lesson, students will be able to explain briefly, action-oriented, the factors that lead drinkable water supply to become a timely requirement. Very specifically said. Okay. Then we'll look at some more examples next day when it comes to writing specific objectives. And once we are thorough with how to write specific objectives by looking at a lesson. I will bring 2 or 3 lessons and get you to look at specific objectives. We will write them, okay? And then we will start working on looking at some lesson plans, one PPP model and one 5E model. Is it okay?
Okay, madam.
Yeah. I don't know whether because of heavy rains, the connection issues, before it actually came in the way and you could not follow me properly, I don't know. But let's see, next day also we will be looking at formulation of objectives for a while with examples. And we will look at 3 lessons and formulate objectives in the class, specific objectives. And then we look at one sample lesson plan, PPP model and 5E model. Okay, Nether?
Okay, madam.
And as you requested, the lecture materials of both the sessions will be psychology, and this one will be sent to you by Monday. That means tomorrow, right? And the assignment as well, as you gave me a reminder. And good night and thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. Good night.
Thank you,
Okay.
ma'am.
Right,
Thank you.
okay. Yes, dear. Sorry for the inconveniences today.
It's okay, madam.